going to lecture for a little bit longer, and then that's all we'll do for today. All right, so for when we talk about, you know, form, function, and so forth, blood type. How many of you know your blood type? Yeah, I don't either. Okay, it's going to be determined by, on the surface of that red blood cell, some glycoproteins, the sugar proteins, and the glycolipids, the little sugar chain extending from the phospholipids of the red blood cell. Now, when we look at the red blood cell, it's really cool what happens after they get mature and they start flying around through the body. One of the things that they need to do, they definitely need to be squishy. They need to be very flexible. So they're going to have in their cytoskeletal makeup proteins, the spectrin and actin, that help give that membrane durability and resilience. Because when we're in the large to medium to small blood vessels, that red blood cell is moving kind of free. However, once it gets to the area of the capillary bed, the vessels get very small, and that red blood cell only moves through that vessel one cell at a time. That is how small the capillaries are. The only way that the red blood cells can move through the capillary bed vessels, okay, it has to be, it's actually squeezed as it moves through, and they go through single file. And as they get squeezed, as they move through that vessel, stuff is being pushed out of it. The oxygen's being pushed off of it. It's really kind of cool. Huh? Yeah, like a sponge. Now, okay, so let that cool down for a minute, and where I was at. Okay, so it has to be able to get squeezed through that small capillary so materials can be removed from the red blood cell. Now, as that occurs, that red blood cell, it's doing that constantly. This is the reason they only have roughly 120 days, because that's a lot of stress on that particular cell. And so they, you know, by the time they get to be 120 days old, they're running pretty ragged, okay? And they'll make their way mostly to the spleen, but the liver can do it also. And in the spleen, the tissue is reticular tissue. Do you guys remember reticular tissue? All right, remember how we had 3 fibers? We had collagen, elastic, and reticular. Collagen, big fiber. Elastic, okay, reticular, smaller, but reticular fiber, when it makes up something, it creates a web-like structure. And that web-like structure has these areas that are like sticking out. So in the spleen, there's reticular fiber that's present, and it's doing this number. And if that red blood cell has gotten worn out, okay, and it comes across some of these areas that can like grab to a hold to it, okay, that red blood cell can go, and if it's like gotten really old and ragged, that one little catch might, and now that blood cell is going to break apart, and all the component parts, we're either going to reuse them or they're going to get sent into mostly feces of the body, which is kind of cool. Now, if we think about, hoping this will work, the function of that little red blood cell, what is it? Our gas transport. That is its major concern. Gotta love technology, right? When it works. Okay, so the major job is the transport of the gases. One of the things that happens when that red blood cell spits out its organelles, it increases its surface area to the volume ratio. Now, that happens, and what do we get to do? Increase diffusion rate of the substances. What does that tell you? The diffusion of what? What two gases? Oxygen, carbon dioxide. So we have now increased the ability of the function of this red blood cell. Now, 33% of the one red blood cell, and how many did we have? 1 to 200 billion red blood cells are needed every day for the one, okay? 33% of the cytoplasm is the hemoglobin. There are up to 280 million hemoglobin molecules on one red blood cell. Now, there is no way I'm going to try to do the math, okay? Especially not in my head. I might one day, if I sat down with a piece of paper and some calculators, just say it. But I haven't done that yet. We want oxygen to the tissues, carbon dioxide to the lungs. In the cytoplasm, we're going to find something called carbonic anhydrase. Carbonic, carbon, all right, anhydrase. It will produce carbonic acid from the CO2 and its reaction with water. How did I say the majority of the CO2 was going to be transported? In the plasma, not on the red blood cell. In order to do this, some stuff has got to take place. Carbonic anhydrase is going to help with the transport of the CO2. Whenever you have carbon dioxide in water, it forms carbonic acid. What is that? All right? I'm the soda delivery person going to the restaurant. And I've got the soda stuff, and then I've got this big tank that I'm going to move. Now I'm going to hook it up to the machine that delivers the fluid. What is that tank full of? CO2. Because when you get the soda, what should it look like and how should it be? Should be bubbly. It's carbonic acid.
So you go deep sea diving?
Go where? Deep sea diving?
Yeah, you got to take your car and swim back.
That's going to deal with the nitrogen bubbles.
Oh.
Yeah. But it's where they'll build up in the blood vessels, get the bends, and it can kill you.
So,
Yeah. Yep.
the carbonic acid is the product of the reaction of CO2 mixing with water.
Yes.
So when they put the O2 in the solution, it forms the carbonic acid.
CO2.
Okay, yes.
CO2 into the solution, it forms the bubbles, which makes it be the drink, the soda.
Okay.
And it is a carbonic acid. Carbonic acid is very weak, however, it's still an acid. Stop for a second. Homeostasis of the body. One of the things that has to be maintained is the pH of the blood for proper homeostasis. What did I just tell you is now getting produced with every CO2, not every, almost all CO2 that gets produced in the body. We are creating an acid which is going to affect the pH of the blood, which is going to affect the overall homeostasis of the organism. Is that a good thing to do? Oh, no, 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 no. No.
What do you want it to be yesterday?
No, we cannot mess with the pH of the body at all. Your body is going to maintain It's pH. Now that's pH of anywhere, okay? Whether I'm talking gastric fluid, whether I'm talking urine, whether I'm talking blood, it has a narrow range that it stays in. Blood should be roughly 7.45. If it were to go to 7.46, why can that throw your entire body's systems off? We have gotten more acidic, but why? The pH scale does what? No. The pH scale, 0 to 14. We look at it and we say 7, neutral. Anything below, acidic. Anything above, alkaline. Oh, I wish they wouldn't simplify stuff all the time. For the pH scale, one little movement on the pH scale is dealing with either H pluses or OH negatives. Is that correct? Now, if there's a teeny tiny little move, you increase the concentration of them how much? Tenfold. It is logarithmic. So if I were to go from 7.45 to 7.46, I am a logarithmic movement. That is the increase or decrease of those ions. Logarithmic, people, times 10. I've increased the pH that much. Do you see now why the body will not allow pH to go out of balance? You let that pH go out of balance in the blood, every system is going to be affected. Does that make sense? So now, I've just told you that there's a process with something that's very abundant in my body, okay? Because we're very abundant with the CO2 that can affect my pH. What you think? So is my body going to have a way to take care of this? Yes. And at the same time, be able to transport that CO2 gas back to the lungs for us to breathe it out without affecting my oxygen getting to the tissues of my body. Okay?
So what happens when the pH goes up? Like, does the body, like, I mean, like, is it like an instant death or something? Like,
It can be. Death can occur very quickly. Yeah. To say that your body monitors the pH is an understatement. And it's the body is not going to allow pH to get but so much out of that range before something goes wrong. Yeah. So what's going to happen? Those hemoglobin molecules, we hear hemoglobin, and we automatically associate that with what? Not the transport of blood, the transport of my oxygen. Now, the structure of hemoglobin, it's very interesting. This is a quaternary molecule. There are 4 protein chains, 4 amino acid chains, okay? So this is a quaternary structure. We have alpha chains, beta chains, 1, 2, 3, 4. In the middle, we find heme groups. Therefore, they call this the globin, they call this the heme, therefore, hemoglobin. Now, globins can bind CO2, okay, but only a little bit. Not all of it is going to bind CO2. Those heme groups, what they want to bind is oxygen. The majority of what you're going to find on that hemoglobin is going to be oxygen molecules. The demand of the tissues is going to determine the concentration of both. The demand of the tissues is going to determine the concentration of the oxygen and the concentration of the CO2. Okay? Now, this little iron in the middle of the heme group, that's where the oxygen is going to attach. So, with the red blood cells, the structure of that hemoglobin, it's going to actually let us know how much oxygen it can carry. If we look at having the 4 heme groups, each one being able to attach an oxygen, okay? If all 4 of them can carry an oxygen, that hemoglobin would be considered 100% saturated. Does that make sense? Okay? So, when we begin, for example, go back to thinking about a hematocrit. The red blood cells settled to the bottom, right? Okay? That is where we're going to have those red blood cells. Of that portion that's making up the red blood cells, 42 to 52% of those cells that are in that 45% portion for men are most likely oxygen loaded. Females are a little less. Why do we tend to have a little less oxygen being transported in the cells? We menstruate. Okay? It affects it. Hemoglobin concentration in that whole blood portion. The hemoglobin, the actual heme and the globin, this actual protein structure, okay? Men should be about 13 to 18 grams of the weight per deciliter. Females, a little bit less because of our fun stuff. Once again, red blood cell count, a little bit higher in men than it is for women. Men, anywhere from roughly 4 to 6 million red blood cells per microliter. Any of y'all ever seen a microliter? Ever had to pipette a microliter? It is a tiny amount. 4 to 6 million red blood cells for a man. 4 to 5 for a female. There can be more, there can be less. Each one comes with a problem. These are our normal ranges that should be found. In women, the reason that the numbers are a tad bit lower